Hello, everyone. And thank you for all joining us today. Today's webinar is titled as Tag, Trace, Track, and Trade, Digitizing the Pharma Value Chain with Blockchain, presented by Techracers. We are leaders in providing end-to-end blockchain solutions for businesses in healthcare, pharma, energy, and fintech. I'm your moderator, Lata Sharma, Chief Marketing Officer here at Techracers. And joining me in this webinar is Mr. Ankur Maheshwari, our CEO, Techracers. Hi, Ankur.
Hey, Lata. Hello, everyone.
Okay, great. So before we get started with the webinar, I would like to give you guys a very quick housekeeping tips and what we are going to cover in this webinar. This webinar session will be completed in a duration of somewhere around 30 to 45 minutes. We will be concluding with a question and answer session where we will answer your questions. You can simply type your questions and share them with us. Once the session is over, we'll answer them one by one. And you can also get more details about our blockchain tutorials, podcast, webinar to our website. Please do visit www.techracers.com. And I'm sure by the end of this webinar, you'll have an understanding of the pharma ecosystem along with its challenges and how blockchain can resolve them. Okay, so the agenda of the webinar will be the state of the current pharma ecosystem, the challenges prevailing in the pharma industry, blockchain answers for pharma problems, blockchain applications in pharma industry, and the future of blockchain in pharma industry. So let's first understand how the pharma ecosystem currently works. The current pharma ecosystem is right now working in silos. We have multiple stakeholders like drug developers, clinical trial supports, government agencies, researchers, healthcare providers, payers, and third-party distributors. They all make the value chain of healthcare, and this is where we have the least transparency, or I should say the inoperability of data. And with mounting pressures of ever-increasing healthcare costs from government agencies and insurance companies, pharma has reached its crucial tipping point to open up to some of the emerging and disruptive technology changes. And we can see a complete shift in the consumer base. Earlier, the customer used to go to the industry to ask for answers, and now they have everything available. They just need the evidence or the confirmation. And they are right now questioning the age-old healthcare review system, where the patient should be treated with better drugs, better pills, or just a normal treatment. But now, what matters now is a patient outcome, the quality of service provided for the patient care. And this is how I see the complete transformation in the pharma sector from a volume-based care to a value-based care, which has prevention, diagnosis, treatment, real cure, and care to it. And with this, we feel the complete pharma industry is focusing on three major issues, that is pharma tech, genetics, and value-based care. Right now, coming back to the major issues prevailing in the pharma industry, I think these are one of the major burning issues which the pharma industry is facing right now. The first one is cold chain inefficacy. So what exactly is a cold chain? I think every drug or a medical equipment requires a specific temperature and humidity control before they reach the end consumers. And the existing system cannot keep the pace with the changing landscape of immunization programs or the medical devices. And there are a couple of quick facts which I would like to share. Due to cold chain inefficacies, globally, they are responsible for a loss of somewhere around 15 to 25% of the purchased doses. And for H1N1 alone, cold chain breaks have the potential to cause a loss of $60 to $100 million. And every year there are 80 million shipments of medical products which are inefficient due to a very inefficient cold chain system right now. So, Ankur, can you give us more brief on how do you think that blockchain can actually remove these bottlenecks in the cold chain supply chain and make the make the drugs more efficient or effective?
Sure. So I'm not sure whether we should cover the basics of blockchain. And for our audience who are not that well versed in blockchain, you can attend some of our earlier webinars where we deep dive into what distributed ledger technology is, what blockchain is, and what are some of the capabilities that blockchain has. But very quick refresh. So the elementary property of any blockchain is immutability, wherein something that enters into the blockchain can never be changed, complete traceability, auditability, and then these smart contracts concept that we have in blockchain, where you could have certain if then else condition written that would be executed by the blockchain, and that ensures that the data behaves in accordance with the way it is supposed to. So now what are the cold chain pain points? The first is traceability, where you want to know where exactly and how exactly did your drug travel from where to where, at what conditions, what temperature, and things like that. That's where I believe the blockchain's auditability feature comes into picture. Now, what happens in a blockchain is once a transaction or once an information goes into the blockchain, it remains there and it does not change. It stays there forever. And everybody who has access to the particular ledger can read that information. So that gives you a complete auditability of anything from cradle to grave. So that's a huge benefit for cold chain. The other is compliance, where you want to meet certain regulatory conditions, and at the same time you need to give certificates to authority that you did not breach any of those conditions and the drug was carried according to a specific temperature and in specific pack containers. So here blockchain along with IoT can be a big game changer. So imagine you have IoT devices that are placed inside these big boxes that are carrying your medicine, and these IoT devices or sensors, they record data, and they don't only measure the data, they also input the same data into a ledger. And then that ledger has, or the regulatory bodies also have a view of the particular ledger. So not just the regulatory bodies can actually inspect the entire data in real time, but they are also assured that the data was never tampered with. So that's going to be a huge plus point for pretty much all the players in the industry. Then the flexibility, like how do you adapt rapidly to the issues and concerns? And here I believe all the reconciliation part or all the events that you might want to trigger based on certain conditions can be codified into the distributed ledger via what we call as smart contracts. So you can say that if the temperature went over this particular degree, then the batch automatically gets eradicated and things like that, which would ensure that the post processing of drugs that happen can be really optimized. And then the stakeholder management part in the entire cold chain. So the peer-to-peer interaction that happens in blockchain. So the way a blockchain or the way any distributed ledger technology works is that every peer have their own specific nodes and they have complete visibility into their nodes and what is happening. Plus, you can also control the view of every node as to what information a particular node sees. So all the stakeholders have that assurity that the data that they are getting is correct and they do not need to trust anyone. So that in itself is a huge plus point, I believe.
Mhm. Okay. Counterfeit drugs. I think that rings a bell in everybody's mind now. And with irregular drug distribution and serialization, the entrance of counterfeit drug is increasing day by day. And you'll be astonished to know, in terms of revenue, I would say, like, Viagra is one of the most counterfeited drug in the world. And in terms of numbers, I mean, probably malarial pills or some antibiotics. And a couple of facts I have actually gathered over here for as per World Health Organization, as many as 50% of the drugs sold on the internet are counterfeit, and around 90% of the drug sold do not originate in the country the selling website claims to be. And this is causing a lot of trouble in terms of the health, the value in the health chain, what we are trying to provide, or the quality of life is decreasing day by day. Do you think blockchain is the solution to reduce this entrance of counterfeit drugs?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think the problem of counterfeit drug is something where blockchain is almost the perfect solution. Think of it like this: in a blockchain or in a normal scenario without a blockchain, you have all these batches of drugs that come in, but there is no way that the end consumer can in any way verify that these batches are actually true, or they were signed, or they were authenticated by the actual manufacturer, the actual wholesaler, or the actual retailers. So that's a huge problem. So if currently a batch of medicine which has, let's say, 100 packets of medicine comes to a wholesaler, or comes or gets dispatched from the factory, and then you are able to somehow enter a few non-genuine or counterfeit drugs, then there is no way that the end consumer can scan something, or they can know that, okay, this drug was not the one that actually got manufactured. But with blockchain, that changes. So the way it happens in a blockchain is the manufacturer, the factory, produces the drug, and after they produce the drug, they give a particular batch or the particular medicine sample or whatever it is a unique code, or they give a barcode or a hash code or something like that. Now that hash code itself is stored in the blockchain. So now when the wholesaler gets it, the wholesaler can scan it on the blockchain and can confirm it that, okay, this is correct, I got it correctly from the manufacturer. And then the wholesaler also puts their his or her own stamp on it as well. So they again sign it. And again, that the signature part or the verification part that the wholesaler actually approved it is captured and stored on the distributed ledger or on the blockchain. Then from there it moves to the pharmacist, who again follows the same process, where first of all he or she verifies that, okay, the manufacturer and the wholesaler are the ones who ratified that this drug is coming from them and not a particular counterfeit. And finally, the end user or a patient also, via a very simple mobile application, can just scan a barcode and can see the entire journey of the trade. So the end user can see who the manufacturer was, at what time did the drug leave the manufacturing unit, at what time did it come to the wholesaler unit, where exactly the geographical location of the factory, the geographical location of the wholesaler, how it was transported, from where it was transported, the route it was transported. All of that information can be made completely available to the end user. So not just are we solving the problem of just counterfeit drugs, rather we are giving a lot of confidence to the end user that the drugs that they're consuming, the drugs that they're paying for, is actually the correct drug that they're supposed to take and not some sort of counterfeit. Now I know the problem of counterfeit drugs exists mostly in developing countries. I'm not saying that the developed countries do not have this problem, but the developing countries are the one that are facing quite a substantial amount of issues with counterfeit drugs. While all of this is great, in order for all of this to succeed, the end user also needs to be enabled. So it's not just technology or just blockchain that's going to solve this. It would need a complete ecosystem overhaul, and it would probably need a multi-pronged approach if we are to fight the menace of counterfeit drugs.
That's interesting. I think by this we can increase the quality of life of the end user and can save lives. Coming back to our one of the other challenges in the pharma industry, that is inadequacy of clinical trials. Again, this is something which is very, very important to discuss, as this has caused many lives during the clinical trials. And there was a survey which was conducted to analyze hundreds of clinical trial documents, and that showed to evidence of research through misconduct. And more than 50% of those are related to the failure to protect the safety of patients, and the oversight or the informed consent, because we feel that at every stage of clinical trial a proper consent from the patient is required and it should be recorded. And give us more details about, Ankur. Do you think, like, blockchain specifically with a combination of AI can be very useful in clinical trials?
Definitely. So there are several aspects to clinical trial, right?
Mm.
And I think the biggest problem is that during the clinical trial itself, a lot of regulations are floundered, and that results in not just a loss of life, but several other issues as well. And besides that, the entire time cycle for approval also increases dramatically. So a pharma company would probably spend years in researching, and then once they go to the FDA, they realize that, or the FDA realizes that a particular step was probably missed or was not done in accordance with the rules and regulations. So with blockchain, think of instead the clinical trial being done in isolation by the drug trial company and the FDAs and the patients. All of them come together in this one giant network or this huge consortia that they all form, and then they can all see the progress of a particular clinical trial right then and there. So if I, as a pharma company, miss a particular step, then I don't have to wait for 4 years for the FDA to tell me that
Mhm.
a certain regulation was missed or a certain step was missed. The FDA can then and there itself say, because the FDA also knows, and the data or your clinical trial process is also shared with the FDA in real time. So that's one big aspect of using DLTs for clinical trial. Then besides that, the smart contracts. So most of these regulations or most of the terms and conditions that you need to go through during a clinical trial, they can be coded via smart contract. So that way we remove the manual intervention as much as we can, and rather we codify it. So any alarm conditions automatically triggers red flags that notifies all the person, all the parties involved, and thereby the feedback loop reduces sharply. Uh, the other part of clinical trial, or the other issue that pharma companies struggle with, is the authenticity of data. Right now, I really don't know whether the data that is coming to me is actually correct or not, because there is no way for me to verify the authenticity of data. But imagine if you and I can put in our health records on some sort of a distributed ledger, and then we can decide ourselves as to whom we want to share this data with, or when we want to become a part of some sort of a research. And then the pharma companies who actually buy our data are assured that these data came from actual individuals, and this data is not something that was fabricated right on the moment and supplied to them. Rather, it has an audit trail going back all to 5 years or 10 years. Then just the amount of research that would be done and the efficiency of the research would improve dramatically. A lot of noise in the data would automatically get removed, and everybody wins. It's not just the pharma companies who are reducing their time, it's also you and me who are actually sharing our data and then and also receiving money in lieu of that. Plus, at the same time, we can decide when we want to share our data and when we do not want to share it. So it's completely in our control. So the privacy of the data is also maintained. So several things like this is where I believe DLT really shines out, and an adaptation of distributed ledger technology or blockchain can not only expedite the clinical trial process but also make it more safer, much better, and far more efficient than what it is.
Mhm. That's great to know. And I believe it'll help greatly in getting this biosimilar products quickly to the market as compared to the biologics, which actually take more than a decade to do the clinical trials and reach the market. Okay, so Ankur, when you compare the pharma industry with the other industries, the adoption has been really, really slow, and it still takes a decade to come up with some kind of a solution to a problem, or come up with a product to the market, as compared to industries maybe in manufacturing or maybe in fintech and other industries. So, with this emerging technologies like blockchain, IoT, and AI. Do you think that pharma industry will be transformed and will be ready for some action in the coming years?
Oh yes, excuse me, for sure. But you also have to realize that the nature of pharma industry is different from the nature of, let's say, e-com industry.
Hmm.
So the pharma industry is in the business of making better drugs and improving lives, and there are no shortcuts to that. So while blockchain, AI, and IoT are definitely going to boost pharma industries, but we must realize the limitations of their application as well. So the very elemental business, the elemental nature of pharma industry is produce better drugs and then supply these drugs to the end users. And I believe that blockchain, along with IoT, along with AI, along with cloud, will help the pharma industry considerably in improving that particular process. So, as we discussed earlier, like drug discovery with better data, with more authentic data, you have better research. That helps not just in drug discovery but also in drug development. So, first, if I can know that, okay, this type of symptoms are present in this particular geographical area and I'm assured about that, then it becomes far more easier for me to conduct my research. So drug manufacturing process itself, as we covered in the entire cold chain section, that every aspect of the drug, right from when it is manufactured to its ingredient, can all be captured in this one giant chain, and the complete custody chain can be kept in the distributed ledger. That gives super visibility to the end user, and that also gives a lot of assurance to all the stakeholders involved. And that is going to help in the supply chain management and distribution part. And then even sales and marketing could benefit out of blockchain, because the data there, in the end, even sales and marketing is dependent upon real data, on actionable data. And if blockchain can guarantee you authenticity of that data, then that's a huge plus for all the divisions that are there in the pharma industry. So yes, I think it will help. And I think pharma industry is not that far behind when it comes to adoption of blockchain. In fact, according to a recent study or a survey that I was reading that day, fintech comes first, obviously, because blockchain has a very, very obvious use case in fintech with cross-border payments and all of that. But the next industry that's after fintech is healthcare and pharma. They're really lapping up. They are understanding the potential that blockchain holds for them. And there are several experimental and pilot projects that are being undertaken currently to demonstrate and establish an actual working business model that can then be replicated across the industry.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. I can see that Techracers has built a solution um, on the application of in the farm for the pharma industry, especially for the drug serialization and the provenance tracking. So can you throw some light on the particular section here?
Oh, sure. So, what we realized was that the first important use case that would emerge out of the pharma industry and blockchain is going to be supply chain management. And in lieu of that, we developed a complete platform that allows anybody to just use our platform as a service and then track their entire supply chain on the platform. So basically, if you want to track how the drug was made, from where the components came in, then which all processes they went through, all of that is possible via our framework, and we call it, the name of the framework is Nucleus. It's basically blockchain as a service, and it gives you provenance out of the box. It gives you smart contracts out of the box. It gives you barcoding out of the box, unique tagging out of the box. So almost all the features that you would need in any supply chain management solution come out of the box in our particular blockchain as a service solution. And the intention behind this was because we understand that the current IT infrastructure is quite huge for the pharma industry, and it's not going to be easy for any CIO to quickly adopt a new technology and completely transform their system. So that's why we build this, so that it allows them to integrate blockchain into their existing solution, code the business logic or write the business rules on top of our engine, let the engine do all the heavy lifting in the back end, and then very quickly roll out a minimum viable product or a proof of concept and see whether blockchain actually brings efficiency or not. And if not, how can the process be improved? So it allows you to very quickly iterate without touching your existing infrastructure. So that's the power of the current framework that we have built. And this is just another slide that goes into the detail of the entire framework. So I think this is too technical and I'll probably skip this.
Okay, that's really good. That was a very good insight about how actually blockchain can solve pharma challenges and the real industry use cases, which can help the pharma industry go to the next level. I think now let's open it for the question and answer session. I've got a couple of very good questions from the audience today. Okay, so question number one. Okay, so what's holding blockchain back from large-scale adoption in pharma?
Oh, well, several things. So the first is obviously blockchain right now is not that matured. So there are no protocols in place, there are no standards in place, and people are still experimenting with it, and standards are still being evolved. And then blockchain is not something that a particular organization or a single organization can adopt and it will work. Blockchain or distributed ledger shines when you have multiple parties involved, because the biggest thing or the most important thing that distributed ledger does is it gets rid of third party. So it creates a trustless system, and for that to happen, consortia need to get formed. And whenever you need to get multiple people to agree to something, it always takes a bit of time. So that's one problem. And then I think the technology also is not completely matured. So for example, we were talking about cold chain, but let's say if you have IoT devices who are actually transmitting data to blockchain every second, and then when you have millions of such devices, currently the blockchain technology or the DLT technology is not that advanced to handle hundreds and thousands of throughput per second. But I believe the technology challenges would get solved in the next couple of years. And at the same time, I think the initial inertia that the pharma industry currently has would also slowly start tapering down. And we will see more and more adoption, especially with the supply chain part of it. That's where I feel the earliest adoption is going to be.
Mhm. Let's take the last question for the day. This is very much related to what we have spoken earlier, but if you can throw some light on future use cases of blockchain in pharma industry.
Oh, well, we already covered some of the most obvious use cases. I'm not sure what. I think all the use cases that we covered are actually
Yeah.
future use cases for for blockchain in pharma, as currently they're all being experimented. And in probably 2 to 3 years from now, I believe some of these will enter mainstream,
Mhm.
and we will see a much wider adoption of them. And it's not just blockchain, so I sort of stay away from this word. It's actually distributed ledger technology. Blockchain is just a subset of it, which is used in cryptocurrency, but the overall technology framework is DLT or distributed ledger technology. And as per the reports of McKinsey and Gartner, healthcare pharma is ready for mainstream adoption in the next 3 to 4 years. So I feel all the cases that we discussed today are going to become the future use cases of blockchain in pharma.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ankur, for answering those questions. I think that will be all for today. And okay, yeah, guys, we are participating in the Blockchain for Pharma Supply Chain event that's in Boston on 22nd of October. You can see a slide there and talking more about how the real industry use cases in pharma and the solutions which can actually change the pharma industry. We'll hope to see you more people there on October 24th and 25th in Boston. And if you'd like to have more details on it, please do write the email to us, and we'll be more than happy to reply to your emails. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today in this webinar and making this session so interactive. We look forward to hosting many such sessions in the future. And please do keep an eye on our social channels for more information. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.